everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission for Tuesday, October 24th, 2023. I would like to open the meeting at 7:30. May we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have roll call, please?
Mr. Carpenter.
Here.
Mr. Fitzer.
Here.
Mr. Colbert.
Here.
Mr. Kucera.
Here.
Mr. Nushai. Ms. Redmond.
Here.
Mr. Scott.
Here.
Mr. Solomon.
Here.
Mr. Twiddle.
Thank you. Agenda item number 4 is approval of this agenda. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to change in the agenda, or are we all happy with it? Seeing none, I will approve the agenda as it stands. And we'll move on for approval. I'm going to need approval for the regular meeting minutes from October 10th, 2023.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes for October 10th, 2023. Support.
And motion support, any changes, corrections, additions, nothing. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Colbert.
Yes.
Mr. Kucera.
Yes.
Mr. Nushai.
Yes.
Ms. Redmond.
Yes.
Mr. Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Solomon.
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Agenda item number 6 is public discussion. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to discuss anything that's not on the agenda? Being none, I will then close public discussion. And agenda item number 7 is site plan for 41 East 14 Mile facade improvements. And Mr. Tangier, you can lead us through this.
Hi, everyone. I'm sure you're all familiar with this site, for being a prominent business right downtown. It's been there for a long time. So for a long time, there was Noble Fish, and there was another little restaurant there, Tirana, for a long time, and a record store, Flipside. And then White Wolf moved in. Well, White Wolf and Noble Fish are combining their spaces. They've taken over that old Flipside space in the middle, and the whole thing is becoming one space. So there's an interior reconfiguration that's happening there. But what we're really here talking about is the exterior of the building, which you can all see in the letter what it looks like today. It's pretty much just a big ephes flat facade thing. And what they are proposing to do is make some changes to that. So they're going to add some outdoor seating that's seasonal, like all the other outdoor seating downtown. That's subject to administrative review and approval. And then the facade changes, we'll kind of get into some details about what all that is as they get further into the letter. But we have some kind of district standards for the city center district, and that's really where all the zoning stuff lies for this. So we look at building elements. Do we have clearly defined internal spaces? Do we have some building composition standards in terms of like how much window and stuff you've got to have, and that's all met by this plan. And then they've got rooftop equipment screens that are shown on the plans. So they've got a bunch of AC units and things up there, and those are screened. We have a bike parking standard just requiring that there be some bike parking within 300 feet of the site. There is bike parking within 300 feet of the site. There's not a lot, but there is some. For transparency, the storefront exceeds the transparency requirements of the ordinance in terms of the amount of window. One thing that we did note is that there are films proposed for a portion of the windows, and that can't exceed 25% of the overall window area. kind of looks like it's roughly in that ballpark, but we didn't have any measurements to verify that it wasn't over 25%. So we wanted confirmation of that. We're not adjacent to any residential properties here. They are putting some planter boxes on the outdoor dining fences. We don't know exactly what the materials for those or the plantings are, but they do show them in the renderings. We looked at the building materials, so those do apply to appear to comply with our city center district standards. They're covering that existing EIFS material with some metal slats and some decorative panels. These are called phenolic panels. I had to look this up. I'd never heard of it before. It's kind of an interesting process. They have these thick stacks of paper that they cure in like a kiln. And I guess it changes them chemically and turns them into this solid material. And then they apply a decorative coat to that surface. And all the research that I did on them shows that they do appear to have very high durability and weather resistance. They've also put a pass-through window on the renovated exterior. If you look at the floor plans, you can see there's kind of a serving area up in the front of the storefront, and they could turn around and pass something out the window. During the outdoor dining season, that will be within the enclosure of the outdoor dining area, it looks like. And then obviously in the winter, that outdoor dining area is going away. So the pass-through window would just be out to the sidewalk. They're also showing that the exterior renovations do wrap around the east side of the building for the full length of their storefront. There's a little water place in the back, and that's not being affected by this, but it does go all the way to the back of their space. And there's the final thing is that there's a metal lattice that's proposed to go over some of the windows. That does generally maintain the transparency of the windows. You can see through it. It's kind of a decorative element. They are showing some signs on their renderings, but there's a separate application for those, and it'll all have to be reviewed under that application. Not proposing any additional lighting at this point. When we look at the pedestrian circulation and the outdoor dining, they are maintaining the public sidewalks. We've checked for the 5-foot clear area, and maintenance of that distance is going to be maintained at all times. That's really for to meet ADA requirements. You have to have a clear area. It can go down to 3 feet for like a certain amount of distance, but we look for 5 feet because that's a much more accommodating area, and there's nowhere that it's less than 5 feet. So we're confident that the clearance on the sidewalk is going to be kept. I don't know if anybody has any questions for me before we go to the applicants.
I have a couple. I don't know if it's proper for you or for.
No,
the applicant.
throw them out there, and if we need to
Okay.
bring the applicant up, we will.
Okay. Are we aware of, is the service window, is that to service walk-ups, or is that to service like the staff that would be waiting on the outdoor?
That's a good
desk?
question. We can ask them that.
But it does seem like it faces the 14 mile, right?
faces
It's not
14 mile, yeah.
facing- Okay.
Yeah.
And as far as the maintaining of the outdoor new, like the umbrellas and the tables, do we have an ordinance and an enforcement? I'm not, this is a judgment on Noble Fish, but just wondering, like, what do we do if, like, paint's coming off or things are getting broken, or is there an ordinance?
Yeah, well, we could enforce on that based on some of the blight ordinances and things that we've got in place. And we've also got, it's our property, so we can basically say, look, this is broken and it's in the right of way. It's got to be fixed.
Yeah, so like, do we expect umbrellas to be brought in nightly? Is that something that we kind of do, or?
I mean, not necessarily. For one thing, our enforcement staff isn't working in the evening, but if I mean, if you've got like a big storm coming through, you kind of hope that the umbrellas would be taken in. But generally speaking, if they're properly
Attached.
folded,
Yeah.
they're not going to catch the wind.
Okay. And I was just wondering if there's any need, or is anyone thought of like, is there gonna need to be more trash receptacles outside? Is this gonna generate additional trash? I know it's been kind of a point of contention just within that back space
Mhm.
that trash bin has overflowed and kind of is a nuisance sometimes. I wasn't sure if we're, I don't know, they're both essentially already operating, right? So,
Yeah,
but
they're-
I don't know if
yeah.
we're generating more trash on the exterior with the outdoor seating, and that's something we need to consider at all. And that's the question.
Well, it's something we can let the applicant speak to, because as far as I am aware and can tell, this won't be a full service seating area. It will be, you get your stuff and go out there and eat it. So people will be responsible for their own trash. So it's definitely something that's fair game to talk about.
Okay.
I like the looks of the drawings that we have here. Along with you, I'm confused by the phenolic panels. Have you seen these material? It's
This is the first time I've ever encountered it. I went online and did a lot of Googling and looking around, and I went to the company's website that makes them, but I also looked at some other resources just to see if there were, kind of reviews of people who had been using them for a while, and if there was any, bad news in those reviews. I didn't really find anything that seemed like a red flag to me,
so it's
but
not a soft ethos material. It's, I mean, it's fairly durable.
it's pretty durable, yeah, and it has a decorative coating, so I guess it's pretty versatile as well. You put a coating on it to give it the appearance that you want it to have.
Okay,
I just had a
you have any questions?
couple of things. Yeah, big fan of both establishments. It looks like a nice enhancement. Will provide, more area for city and residents and patrons to sit and enjoy the outside area. So that's nice. Along with the trash, which I would love to have the applicants address, because I do know that those bins are already full as is. So outside, they
Mhm.
could easily become even more full. But also the other thing I didn't really notice, and this is me trying to study blueprints, not having the expertise, but I didn't know if there's any changes to the entrances. So thinking about the flow of people in and out of the building, there is a ton of traffic, especially, during lunch hours and things like that. So Joe, I don't know if you saw, otherwise maybe the applicant mentioned, if there's any changes. I see the pickup window, obviously. I didn't know if they're closing any front entrances or if the back entrance will still be available for the White Wolf, if there'll be an additional one added.
So
Just some clarification.
from the floor plans, it looks like there's not a difference in the number of entrances now, and whereas from when you come in from the back, you can only visit White Wolf now, you'll actually be able to visit the entire thing from the back now. So because it's all going to be one space that flows together. But yeah, as it looks like they've got the same number of entrances going for, they can confirm that, but it does look like they've not closed off any entrances.
Any more questions for Joe?
So the only thing, not to get down on the material, but that's not like on our approved list of material type list, right? But is it something that maybe in the future we should look further into and consider adding it to?
Well,
approved?
that's why we have that or other materials determined by the planning commission to be, acceptable kind of language in there, because we do live in a time where there's a lot of new materials coming out all the time. So we always have to have that catch-all of, if somebody's presenting something new and it seems like it's actually going to work and it's durable and it looks good, then we've got some flexibility to approve that.
Did you see when you were doing all the research, like a lifetime, like a longevity of it, of like 10 years, 20 years, or?
It is supposed to be, I think, a 20-year product. I could maybe verify that while they're talking, but I'm pretty sure that was the number that I saw.
And that is just like that's not over everything. That's just the accents, right?
That's on that upper band that's currently at Ethos, the upper sign band.
But
is
it's
what
gonna
that-
wrap all the way around.
It's gonna wrap to the side,
Oh, okay, I
yeah.
thought it was just the what's the stuff with the space in between? I don't know.
That's metal slats.
Okay, yeah, that almost looked like roof material to me when I saw it on there. That's what the
Sure.
metal,
Yeah, those are horizontal metal.
okay.
uh,
Is the applicant here this evening?
We are here.
Yeah, would you care to come to the microphone and answer any of our questions?
Good evening, Commission. My name is Brandon Kritzman. I'm a principal at Detroit Architectural Group. I'm joined in the audience by Miss Caitlin Carter, who represents Studio H2G, who's the designers of the project. We are the architect of record leading the project documentation side of things, the engineering side, architecture and structural. I think the city did a fair enough job representing the overall scope of the project. Obviously, White Wolf Bakery exists and has for quite some time. Noble Fish is a fixture in the community. One World Market, the Japanese market that operates inside of that space, is very popular. Once Flipside Records vacated that space, the parent company that owns all three of these other brands was looking to engage the property owner and develop the property in such a way that it starts to feature the Japanese culture and community in a way that is not currently as cohesively represented. And that's the goal of the Noble Village project. And there's a location here that we're pursuing and then one in Novi as well, in hopes to take this as the first location and roll that out into a wider audience, in other locations that exist today. We have a very unique opportunity here in Clawson to build on something that is so immensely successful in the community as it exists now. But obviously with that comes some changes that need to take place both internally and externally. Inside the building, we're looking to relocate White Wolf Bakery and Patisserie to what is now Noble Fish. We're going to take the market and move it over to the other side where White Wolf currently is and expand that into Flipside Records so that the market itself can expand its offerings, expand what it offers to the community, and also feature a lot of the to-go takeout items that Noble Fish is so popular for. That opens up an opportunity to create a food court in that, call it eastern half of the building, where you've got Noble Fish, you've got White Wolf relocating over there. There will be a small little bar in there as well, and a ramen sandwich concept that creates this kind of smaller ecosystem of restaurants inside that space, augmented and directly open to the grocery side, the One World Market side, that will maintain the access to the back where White Wolf currently opens to the back, and you're able to come through to the front. While we'll be closing that front entrance, we'll be connecting that as one fluid space to where Flipside Records currently is. And that will be an entrance and exit out the front of the building as well. So just to clarify, one of the things that was mentioned, the current White Wolf space, the front entrance will close, but because that will all be one space, we'll be controlling that one access point through what is now Flipside and exiting through what is now White Wolf across the back. On the eastern half of the project, we do have those 4 food concepts in the food court. We are maintaining the 2 existing openings in the back for service, for deliveries, for the kind of the back of house operation. We are also introducing a to-go takeout sort of scenario. Between COVID and the world being a little more online than it ever was before, we're trying to accommodate those online orders and having that access come in through the back. Across the front, we've got the existing openings will be maintained. There are 2 transaction locations. One is the current entrance to Noble Fish, which will be converted to a front entrance for transactions, coffee, White Wolf, that sort of thing. I think you asked a question about what time of year those will be open. There's a second location at the bar restaurant service area that supports the outdoor seating. That will be seasonal and that will only be opened and operable and utilized when the outdoor seating takes place to try and limit traffic so that we're only serving beverages and food service in that outdoor space through that window. White Wolf Bakery will be serving coffee and whatnot year round. So those are the two differentiating factors between those components. I may ramble a bit, apologize if I do, but I know there was a lot of questions that were asked. I'm trying to cover them as well as I can remember them. One of the other questions that was asked was the refuse that will be created by this outdoor space. All of that is intended to be contained within the confines of the seating area. Those areas will be bussed and cleaned by staff of the restaurants, and that stuff will all be cleaned up and taken back indoors. So there's nothing being added to the outdoor trash receptacles. I understand that there may be some stresses on the existing receptacles that are out there now. I would anticipate, fingers crossed, if we're successful, there's some increase of that, but not of a volume that equates to all of those seats that are out there. Those seats that are out there are to be cleaned and bussed internally, and that trash will be taken inside and dealt with through the typical trash receptacles out the back and dumpsters and all of that.
So are you saying that wait staff will be attending to those tables, or is it kind of like a grab your food and go sit, but you have people attending to?
So it's your second version that you offered there. It's not that you go sit down and a wait staff comes and takes your order.
Mhm.
It's a little more like a grab and go sort of basis. The concept of the food court is that you're able to visit any of these 4 kind of smaller stations inside the space. And they're still testing out exactly how they deliver that. A lot of it may be online. A lot of it may be through phones so that you can order from the different stations. Maybe you get a number that gets brought to you, but it's not like your traditional sit down dining sort of scenario.
But typically.
On the cleanup side, which
Yeah.
is probably the most important part, there will be opportunities for people to throw their own stuff out, but staff will also be going through that space to clean that up. It's not anticipated that any of that refuse and trash will be thrown in the street receptacles.
Well, so you will have receptacles outside, because typically in a setting like that, people clean up after themselves.
I would,
Yes.
right? And I would
I'm
expect my
in
kids
a
to
setting.
as well, right?
So you will have exterior trash, receptacles inside of that court. then?
Yes, there will be like a bus station or something to that effect. So
Okay.
we're not relying on the city receptacles along 14 Mile to help service that location.
No, I realize that you just only mentioned interior receptacles first.
They may physically be located inside and outside. We're not relying on the city receptacles. We're going to have trash receptacles outside.
Outside, okay.
Yeah. No, I follow you a bit.
Mhm.
And hopefully I answered your question as well. Now, the last thing, if I recall correctly, and I may have missed over a couple of the items, the exterior facade. What's there today is, as you mentioned, a relatively consistent EIFS facade that wraps from the burger joint east along 14 Mile, wraps the corner, goes to the back, and then it stops at that point and becomes more like a painted concrete block in the background. The goal of the design team was to draw attention to this location and create a little different vibe than what's there now. Now, without tearing off the entire EIFS facade, the goal was to create a scenario where we're drawing attention to the entrance points, and we're creating a little different environment that's more cohesive and consistent with the interior design and decor of both the food court and the grocery store area. So what has been proposed is a series of accent sections, if you will, of the louvers and the accent materials. So we are still relying on that EIFS base that goes around, but building on top of that with additional aluminum standoffs, framing that you're certainly familiar with. And I'd like to pass around, if I could, a sample of the phenolic material. Starting on one side.
Which I've been doing the research here. So it has about a 30 to 40 year design life outside. And then when used in interior spaces, about 40 to 60 years.
Have you worked
And-
with this material before?
We have, but only within the last 5 years,
Okay.
right? So I can't personally certify that, and I've seen it for 20 years.
Last 5 years.
We have not. And the reason that people go to this sort of material, and as someone alluded to, we're at a time where the products and materials and the evolution of those things is happening so fast, it's super hard to keep up with. I'm always very suspect of people who walk in with a guarantee that it's going to look the same for 30 years. I've got a credit union near my house in Livonia that had wood panels that I tell you, they look purple today. And 5, 6 years ago, they looked beautiful and they were wood. So we did do a fair bit of due diligence to understand this material before selecting it. And we are confident that it will maintain its color. We're confident that, I mean, realistically, 20 years down the road, that thing's going to need a whole refresh, rebrand anyway.
Right.
But
Is
we
it
are
recycled?
confident in the material.
Is it recycled material? I just, someone mentioned it was like compressed paper and.
Compressed paper, I would assume it is.
I'm going to defer to the audience on that one, but I couldn't tell you.
I'm not sure. I would imagine that it probably was compressed paper, but I would have to do the research.
So we don't know the answer to that offhand.
Seems pretty stable.
And really, it's not a structural material. It is an accent. And then we have LED lighting behind that to kind of create this glowing sort of effect at those locations.
So that was gonna be one of my questions, and I guess that should have been for Joe as well. I thought Joe mentioned there wasn't lighting that was proposed. Maybe I misheard him, but it does look like on your plans that there's a few different types of lighting. Is that all outside, right?
I would say there's 3
Yeah,
types of accent lighting. One is the LED strips that happen behind the accents, and you'll never actually see the light itself. You'll see like a glowing effect behind the light, or sorry, behind the material. The second layer is there are sconces on, I think, 4 or 5 of the stone piers, if you will, that happen along the facade. And then, as was mentioned earlier, there is exterior lighting, these blade signs, not lighting, signage, the blade signs that have been proposed. And while that's a separate item, I just wanted to reference that.
okay, so the light fixtures those are for inside, right? Like the globe one, and it looks like another one's like on a stand. Are those all inside?
So that's the last layer here.
Mhm.
There's a couple small accent lights that are located. I don't know exactly what you're looking at because it's not on the screen at the moment,
Yeah,
but there are some small accent fixtures that are likely just plug-in fixtures in the exterior seating area.
Yeah, so they're, but they are actually solar lights,
okay,
Right.
and they were just resting.
so they are outside.
Yeah, several of them are just tabletop solar lights. They put them in the design package just to understand.
Things on the table.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
then-
one says Pablo design and one says over.
Yep, yeah, so the Pablo design one is actually a table, solar light, and then we have, I think, just one of the other lights, which is just a plug-in like exterior floor lamp. And there's also some that are built into the planters with their solar light.
Okay,
And a lot of those are just to try and avoid me pulling out my cell phone, and turning on the flashlight so I can read the menu.
right. I just didn't know if those were considered as part of the plan originally that Joe was looking at or not. And do you know about how many people outside your seating? Like how many seats are gonna be made available?
I know we reviewed this with the downtown group, but I don't recall the exact number. I'd have to check in the documents.
Okay, I just don't see trash in any of the plans that I saw, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't see renderings that like included it or. It would seem like it's important to just make sure it's there, I guess.
I don't disagree with you in any way whatsoever.
Yeah,
and can assure you that that will most definitely be added.
Okay.
Any further questioning or? Yeah, motion if so.
Mr. Chair, motion to approve 41 East 14 Mile facade improvements as presented.
Support.
Can I ask a question of Joe real quick? Joe, did we check lumens and stuff on lighting on exterior? Just because I don't remember you talking about, I assume they're within our scope of lighting regulations.
Yeah, we don't have any direct sources of light. It's not like a, pole mounted thing or a wall, pack or something like that. So I'm not sure that we can really get a photometric measurement off of it. It's more of an accent glow kind of thing. So it's not going to be at the level that would be you'd be able to do a photometric plan on. So it seems to be compliant. Let's put it that way. You can't see any of the light sources, and it's not going to be directly shining light. It's all backlighting.
Okay,
And I would say, just to tag onto that, the intent of the lighting approach is that it's more for an accent sort of situation. We're not featuring product out there. We're not putting a car out there that we're trying to sell. There's no high pole mounted lights. There's no LED floods that are out there. There's no wall packs. This is all trying to engage a pedestrian vibe along 14 Mile as much as possible.
Okay, I have a motion and I have a second down here.
Yeah.
A second. Okay, can we make a couple additions to your motion? I think there's 3 items here that the states here. Well, it appears to be roughly 25%. The applicant should confirm that the overall area of the windows in the processed area with a limited transparency. We don't want the windows all screened off so much.
Mhm.
So I think that should be a stipulation on the motion. Materials I think are fine. The signage is not dimensionalized yet. A sign application will be required for the signs. That could be added to the motion if you would so see so. And the last thing is a 5-foot clear area maintained along the sidewalk out in front. Maintenance of this distance should be a condition of approval also.
What's the last one? Okay.
They have to maintain the 5-foot clear area out in front of the building.
Okay.
So if
As amended for the 3.
you will
items
have
of the
those
chapter.
3, and do I still have support on that?
Yeah.
Okay, any other conversations? Seeing none, can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Scott.
Yeah.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer,
Yes.
Mr. Colbert,
Yes.
Mr. Kucera,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
yes.
Mr. Nushai.
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome to Carrying On in Blossom.
On behalf of the entire project team, we thank you very much. And I know that the team at Noble Fish, Noble Village, True World Group, One World Market is very much looking forward to taking these next couple steps and being part of the community for the next decades to come.
And do you proceed doing that now, or are you gonna be waiting till spring to do this, or?
They want me to turn in permit drawings tomorrow.
Well, one important question, are you gonna close down for these renovations or?
So I'd be happy to address that. One, just touching on one of the 3 amendments to the amendment or 3 amendments to the motion. As far as the screening of the windows, we are trying to create something that is cohesive around the building. We do have some displays and some aspects of the proposed operation that aren't best to show off, like back of cabinets and whatnot. So we're trying to balance that, and we will certainly make sure that we meet that 25% ordinance. A lot of the items that you see in the renderings are what's called a kumiko woodworking pattern. Kumiko is a Japanese woodworking technique where they carve these intricate patterns out of wood. That's what's intended to be reflected. So I'm certain that we're going to meet that 25%. It'll be a little touch and go. But we really want to feature the food theater concept. so that we're going to have as much open area as possible. We're not intending to hide anything. We want to actually feature as much of that activity as possible. As far as phasing and shutting things down, I can't tell you how many versions of the phasing plan we developed over time, but the goal is to have these components down for as little time as possible. In fact, I can tell you that from the White Wolf standpoint, we're actually going to, excuse me, well, it hasn't been absolutely finalized. The intent is to keep White Wolf up and operational while we build the new one in the new space and then relocate them over there. They open there. It opens up that entire side where Flipside is and White Wolf to being constructed all at once. So there is a cognizant effort to make sure that we minimize the downtime in all of these. And True World Group is exploring offsite commissaries for temporary baking purposes so that they're not losing any continuity of product. So those efforts are being taken into account, and I assure you there was a whole lot of effort put forth inside the team to make sure that we maintain those operations as much as possible. So any other questions I left out there?
I think we're all good. Thank you.
All right. Well, on behalf of the team, we thank you all very much and you have a great evening.
Yeah, you do.
I'm gonna steal back that one sample if I could.
Move on to agenda item number 8 is the master plan discussion, stormwater management.
We talked about traffic calming a couple of meetings ago, and now we're going to talk about the other item. Let's see, gotta get this on the screen.
Joe, you may address this, obviously. I think the trainings, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm not interested. They actually are quite interesting and find a lot of information out of these things. And they're supposed to be idea generating, I'm sure. But is there any kind of concrete steps that we should be thinking about when we go through this information? Or are you going to go through like what's next? Because we fill some of our
Sure.
agenda when we have time with some of the training opportunities to learn more and think about ideation. But
Mhm.
I do always look at the timeline, and not that I don't know if we're behind, but there's some opportunity to make up gaps, right? Where they're supposed to have open houses and things that haven't quite happened yet. I think they were
Sure.
First, but we didn't have anything regarding the specific modules yet. So
Mhm.
can you touch on that maybe before we jump in?
Sure, yeah. So this is probably gonna be the last informational bit on the infrastructure piece of this before we move to starting to make some recommendations and getting some basically draft material to you.
Okay, and then that's what you guys are intending to bring to us.
Exactly,
So
yeah.
we don't need to be.
No,
I
no,
think about what our
no,
role is in
Yeah.
terms of coming up with immediate next steps as this commission. We need to be
right.
drafting ideas while we're looking at this.
And so once we get that draft text to you, the idea is that we go through that together and we make sure that the planning commission is comfortable with it. And then that forms the basis for our input sessions, our public input sessions. So we're putting some ideas out there for people to respond to.
Will you be laying that out like one module at a time, or are you going to present us with kind
It's
of?
probably going to be a few modules at a time. I think we can combine some things. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, stormwater, everybody's favorite, least favorite subject. Just a little bit of a table setting here up front about the trend in stormwater in Southeast Michigan. It's an upward trend. So total annual precipitation in Southeast Michigan increased by about 44% from 1951 through 2014, which is a huge increase. If you were designing something for a certain expected rainfall in 1951, when 2014 rolled around, it was not adequate for the original for the rainfall at that time. I mean, it's a massive increase. The period from 1981 to 2010 had 41% more very heavy precipitation events than the period from 51 to 80. So not only are we getting a lot more rain, more of that rain is coming in individual events where we just get dumped on. So you're not getting those 3 days in a row where it rains lightly as often as you once did. You're getting a deluge and then 7 dry days and then another deluge. It's a much more sporadic rhythm to the rain. Very heavy storms are really just no longer rare in this region. Seems like we get at least one every year. So, a lot of our assumptions about what constitutes a 50-year storm or a 100-year storm or a 500-year storm are undergoing revision right now. Oakland County just released new stormwater standards earlier this year, which we're starting to apply to all the projects that come in the engineering review phase. And they're very different standards than they used to be. They require a much more rigorous attention to the management of stormwater on any given development site. So that's the context in which we're operating. A little more context, some basics. So water is carried away from local collection points by county drains, waterways like the Rouge River or something, and then sewers. So in Clawson, nearly all of our water goes into the sewer system. We're a very built out community. We only have a couple little dribs and drabs of actual county drain that are even in our boundaries. And we don't have any open water systems like rivers or ponds or anything like that that would collect water within our city limits. We're in the OAK drainage district of the Great Lakes Water Authority's 40-year wastewater plan. And that lumps us in with Oak Park and Royal Oak, Berkeley, Birmingham, and a few other cities, most of Troy as well. The boundaries of those districts are partially based on the watersheds. You can see the kind of ragged line around the pink there. That's the watershed boundary between the Rouge and the Clinton River watersheds. But then the other boundaries are political boundaries. So the north end of Troy and the boundary between Oakland County and Macomb County. We also, in Clawson and a lot of the cities to the south of us, have a combined storm and sanitary system. So you can see here, this is the full system. All the gray is the full system. The light gray is separated systems. So you have a storm system and a sanitary system. The dark gray is where you have your combined systems. All the storm and sanitary winds up in the same pipe when it's heading toward the water treatment plant. Capacity downstream does determine how much we can put into the system without causing problems. There is a lot of capacity downstream. Also important is that everything flows downstream, and there's a lot of things in the system that are further out than we are. But that doesn't mean that like water is coming from across Maple and going right into all of our small pipes. They are large interceptor systems that take all of that water. So it's not like a totally cumulative effect coming down from, say, Auburn Hills through Clawson, through Hazel Park, through Detroit. You have larger interceptors that everything is directed toward. So all of our pipes are going toward their various interceptors, and so is everybody to the north of us. Our water just generally goes downstream to treatment plants. There are about 60 treatment plants in Southeast Michigan. They're spread throughout the region. But just important to know that our sanitary and our storm water collection is a combined system. So if you have an event that causes backflow, you might get some of both coming out of the system. And that's the way it was done. It really, you look at the map across the country, it's older communities have these combined systems. And we don't build that way for a reason now. But retrofitting a system to separate those things is incredibly costly because you literally have to replace miles and miles of pipes that are all underground. So it's not likely to happen anytime soon. Let's put it that way. We also have a little bit of a lead pipe legacy being an older community. This is a little less to do with sewer than it is to do with water. But a lot of our water service leads were originally made of lead. The city's been replacing them on a kind of as we go basis over the years. We don't really have that many left, but there are still some. So when an older building comes in for some sort of improvement, if we're looking at the water, generally we're looking to replace those lead service lines with a more modern material that is less likely to cause a problem if the wrong chemical gets put into the system, as happened in Flint. So what happens when it rains? So soils matter. Some soils are more permeable than others. If you have sandy or loamy soils, they're going to soak up a lot of the water. If you have clay, it's going to sit on top and roll off. We have a lot of fill in Claus. It's not as bad as where I am over in Berkeley. It's like all fill because it was a swamp once and it's all this horrible packed clay and the water just sits on top of it and flows. Exposed ground absorbs water at a rate that corresponds to the soil type. So if you have a lawn or, a forest area or something, whatever kind of soil you've got there is going to determine the rate of absorption. However, if you have land that's covered with impervious surfaces, pavements, or buildings, that water isn't going to be absorbed and it's got to go somewhere. So we have to figure out where to put it.
Hey, Joe,
Mhm.
can we ask questions along the way? or
Sure, yeah.
further?
Absolutely.
So I noticed on, I think it's Rochester Road by the park in Royal Oak, when they're repaving, they almost have like this berm, and it's familiar to me in like northern Macomb and Oakland County,
Mhm.
where like it's where stormwater can collect and kind of flow alongside the
yep.
roadside. Is that something that we've considered what are those called first off? And
Well, what you're seeing there is probably a swale. You're going to see a diagram of it
Okay.
later in this presentation.
okay,
And yes, that is the kind of thing we can consider. And of course, you have to consider the context. So we have a lot of like end-to-end paved sites,
yeah,
particularly on our main roads, because we've got these legacy commercial developments, and we also have very tiny lots on which to do anything. And we're at more or less a built-out condition. So you do have to have the room for it. You have to have the soil for it as well. So there's some considerations there, but it is definitely a kind of system that we can look at as one potential element of an overall stormwater management system.
okay, you have to have the right soil for that, so it's not just sitting, right? Like the water's not. just sitting there,
The
or-
water is supposed to infiltrate slowly
Okay.
in those. It's a retention feature that then the water's not meant to sit there indefinitely. It's meant to percolate into the ground
Okay,
or flow somewhere else, depending on the design criteria.
and when you said Oakland County is setting stormwater standards, are you talking about the GLWA, that, like, do they set standards for like building or for cities or?
It's the county itself is the entity that is setting the standards. So Macomb County, and this is the Clinton River watershed is in both Oakland and Macomb County, but they have different stormwater standards. So in one part of the watershed, you might be subject to certain rules, and in another part of the watershed, you would be subject to other rules.
Is that, can you explain, like, what do you mean by rules? Are you saying like the cities are meant to impose these things starting now, or like just new building sites, or can you? I guess I don't.
It is a starting now kind of thing.
Okay.
So if you're redeveloping or developing, you would be subject to those standards.
Gotcha. Okay.
And some cities do have their own standards as well. Clawson uses the Oakland County standards.
And that's just stormwater standards such as like retention under new development.
That's one of the
plans.
things it speaks to. It talks about flow rates. It talks about how much retention you need to be doing. And typically that's expressed in terms of how many inches of water would be covering the site. So like, let's say you have an acre and you're going to pave half of it. There's a calculation that occurs that says, okay, what if we had to hold the equivalent of 3 inches of water across the entire paved area of this site? How big would the pipes underneath the lot have to be in order to do that? And then you get your volume from that. And that's the amount of pipe that you put underground.
And is it just pipe or is it retention as well?
Well, it depends.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it depends on the site.
Okay.
And we'll get a little into that a little bit
Okay.
more later. But like we said, built environment, everything that's hitting those roofs, everything that's hitting those parking lots, everything that's hitting those roads, that water's got to go somewhere. And if it's flowing unimpeded, it will go there fast too. That's another thing to think about because, the speed of water influences the rate at which it erodes the things that it's flowing over. So detention versus retention is an important concept to understand. So a retention device is designed to permanently hold water. It's like the top thing where you've got a pond that collects water from all the rain events, and there's pretty much always going to be water in that pond. A detention area is meant to temporarily hold the water and then slowly release it into the larger system over time. So that detention basin in this photo here might be full or have, 3 or 4 inches of water in it for a few days after a major storm. But after that, it's going to look more or less like it does in the photo because that water is eventually going to either percolate into the soil or be released into a sewer system at a slow rate that the sewer system can manage more easily than all the water going straight in during the storm. So we can talk about different types of retention devices. So surface storage, you've got a pond on the surface, essentially. This happens to be a retention pond, but it just looks prettier than a detention pond. So I like the photo more. It requires substantial land area because you do have to have the space to put that water on the surface. We don't have a lot of surface retention in Clawson because we don't have the space. The more pavement you have, the bigger the area of the pond. So when you have sites that are mostly paved out, you're not really leaving any area for the pond, which is when we switch to the most conventional alternative, which is underground storage. So you bury oversized pipes or tanks underground to hold the water. This is our best option, generally speaking, just because of the nature of our community where we have a built out environment. So we have to find a place to put the water, and that's generally going to be under what you're paving, because other development can be placed on top. And then what this will do, it'll hold the water and it will gradually release it into the stormwater system and take it away from the city. And what keeps the water from flowing out at a high rate is called a restrictor valve. So you basically have a huge pipe that the water is sitting in, and then you've got a smaller pipe that allows the water into the storm system, and it just restricts the flow so that it doesn't go in as fast and overwhelm the system.
Is this the standard for, some of the new developments that we've seen? They've said 100-year retention. This is
Exactly, yeah. So when the parking lot was redone over at Ace, a system like this went underground below that parking lot. I watched them do it. The Trader Joe's down on Woodward. They did it a few years ago. They put these huge pipes under the parking lot there. And it was quite a thing to watch. They were very, very large pipes. A lot of water can sit under that parking lot.
And who determines the release rate? Is that like
That would be part of the stormwater standards at the county level, and that's generally based on what the Great Lakes Water Authority has in terms of capacity. They're looking to limit the flow into their interceptor pipes so that it doesn't overwhelm their capacity. So there's a standard called the agricultural runoff rate, and it's kind of what you would expect to come off of an untouched property just naturally. And that is one of the standards that's applied typically to residential lots. You want water to flow off a residential lot at the agricultural runoff rate. And I don't know exactly what the rates are in terms of how these pipes feed into the overall system, but they're all based on percentages of that rate. Another thing that we look at when we're talking about these retention systems is water quality. So you can have filtering devices in these systems, and they can come at either end. So a lot of systems filter water as it enters the retention device, but you can also filter it at the point of release. The point of entry is usually the easier place to clean out. So that's the more common place to put it. Also, you don't have filthy water sitting around if you're filtering it on the way in. So what's under the manhole? These are manholes in Japan. Andy can attest to this because he was in Japan this summer. They have really cool manholes in Japan.
They're made of paper.
Nice.
Saw with my own 2 eyes.
So these can be works of art, and I think they should be. But it's an access point to the system that facilitates maintenance. And typically what you have at the bottom of that manhole is you can climb down to an open channel. It might be an opening in a very small pipe, or it might be one that's large enough to walk through. I don't know if you've ever seen The Third Man or something, but a lot of the scenes in that movie take place in the sewers of Vienna, which are these massive chambers that are actually quite beautiful. So a lot of larger, older cities have these incredible sewer networks that are just kind of strikingly gorgeous old brick tunnels that you can really that have a lot of headroom. You can actually walk through them pretty easily. And they have walking paths next to the channels even. So we have some kind of typical infrastructure elements that you'll see. You'll see catch basins. This is an example of a catch basin. These can be in the middle of a parking lot. They could be over at the curb and the gutter. Pipes, restrictors, which I was just talking about. Clean outs, which is a filter. You have to have a point where you can get in there and remove the filter, get all the crud out of it and put a new filter in. Gutters and curbs are part of the stormwater management system because they channel the flow of water. So if you have a road, it's pitched so that the peak of the road is in the middle and the water flows to the edges, down the gutters and into the catch basins. The curbs keep the water from flowing off the road and onto people's properties. French drains is another one. They're typically used in a yard that floods or something. It's a pipe that's perforated that gets buried, and then as water seeps into the ground, it'll go into the pipe and be directed more rapidly away from the area that's flooding. We have to keep track of the condition of our stormwater infrastructure. So one of the tools that we have to do that is these little robots or lines with cameras on them that you can run through the pipes and actually look at the physical condition of the pipe from inside the pipe. And you can find cave-ins, you can find cracks, you can find obstructions, You can find just areas of buildup that you might want to look at removing, and there you might do that chemically, you might do that ultrasonically. There's a lot of different ways to do these things now. But when you see the reports that we looked at a couple meetings ago on the condition of the sewer system, this is how we find that out. So you run these inspections periodically, ideally. And, you know, hopefully you're scoping your whole system over the course of whatever period you set. But this is really kind of the nuts and bolts of how we actually determine what the condition of these pipes is.
So the city owns one of these?
I think the city does have at least one.
We have our own.
Yeah.
Like I said, I couldn't play the brand, but that's something we can get for you.
Yeah, when the city of Berkeley does its touch a truck events at the community center, they actually bring out their sewer camera robot and they like drive it around the parking lot for kids. It's kind of funny. They have all these like points of articulation. They can really kind of go around bends and stuff. It's kind of cool.
And if you want to get really advanced with some of these robots, some of them are equipped with GPS.
Sure.
So you can get an accurate location, like I guess underground of where the pipe is. So
Right.
before digging, or if you wanted to get a sense of where your pipes were, you knew exactly it was right here underneath the road or underneath the sidewalk or.
Yeah, it's very useful. I mean, why dig up a whole area to try to find a pipe if you can just dig straight to it? You know?
Right.
You get the little beeping dot like Alien or something. So looking at a couple different alternative stormwater management systems, there really aren't that many of these because they're all kind of similar in various ways. You've got a couple of different bioretention options. So you've got rain gardens. Generally what they do is they collect water for slow filtering into the ground. The soil mix is usually chosen to filter out contaminants. They do need to be clean because they tend to collect rubbish. Water is designed for water to flow into it, right? So if there's somebody dropped a napkin on the ground in a parking lot or something, that napkin is going to ultimately be in this rain garden. So they do have to be cleaned out. You can manage that with traps and filters at the inflow points, so that you have less ground to cover when you're cleaning them up, but they definitely require attention. And I would say the same is true of the next item, which is the bioswale, which we were talking about earlier. It's similar to a rain garden, but usually it includes a pipe to direct collected water that's been filtered. It's the same type of pipe you would find in a French drain. It's got perforations in it so that the water seeps into it rather than flowing into it from like an opening, like a catch basin or something like that. And then you have certain types of plantings that are come down the side. You've got plantings in the middle where the water is actually going to pool up. Those plants are generally chosen for a couple of different purposes. One is that they might slow or absorb some of the water that's coming in so that you don't have a rush or as much of a rush entering the system. And then the other is that it might be actually in the area where water is pooling, so it's water resistant, and it might be filtering out some chemicals or toxins that would be in the water and holding those in the plants themselves. Generally, you're going to put some sort of engineered soil under that area that pools up. So you're not just using whatever topsoil is there. You have a specific mix that's going to allow the water to infiltrate, but it's going to pull out some of those chemicals and toxins through biological processes. And typically your perforated pipe is going to be surrounded by gravel, which is going to allow the water to flow through to the pipe. There also is generally some engineered soil below that even, so that you're continuing to filter as the water that gets past the pipe moves toward the water table.
Engineered, I've never heard of that. Is that a standard that they set with the Oakland County as well as an engineered soil?
I do think Oakland County has some guideline. I don't know if they're standards necessarily, but I do think they have some guidelines for swales. When you go out to the more rural townships, you'll see along the roads, they've got the ditches instead of
Yeah.
underground
Yeah, I just didn't know if
systems.
there was engineered
Um,
soil, is it like charcoal or something in there,
Well, there might be, yeah. I think the mixes vary a little bit, but there are best practices for what the consistency and makeup of that soil is.
Hmm.
Right, I'll kind of add
Sure.
as the resident engineer. It's, it's a phrase, I suppose, but it's dependent on the mixture of what it's composed of. As well as the size of whatever it is we're talking about. So it could be soil, it could be sand, it could be whatever we're
Sure.
putting in underneath a building, underneath a road. It's all engineered material.
oh, okay.
So engineers just specify exactly what we're putting in there in terms of size, granular
Right.
material.
Gotcha, I thought it was
Right.
literally like. you
Oh,
would-
yeah, it's not like being manufactured or something.
Right,
but
like.
yeah.
at a
Well,
certain
it's
water
possible
quality,
that
I
it could be,
was like,
yeah.
wow, I didn't know it was that sophisticated, okay.
Yep.
Got you, thank you.
But yeah, you might specify, for instance, in your engineering specifications that you want one of the layers of gravel to be a larger grain of gravel, and then below that you have more of like a pea gravel type thing to this is just one example. But that might be part of your engineering specifications. You're saying this type of gravel, this type of gravel.
Gotcha. I'm like, wow.
A giant Brita filter.
Like essentially through the soil, I'm like, wow, that's cool, okay.
But yeah, you could potentially, if you lit, like, let's say you were on the Hawaiian Islands, you might actually have like black sand that you
Right.
could use as one of your filtering agents. That could potentially be very effective. Little less natural rain barrels are another way of capturing stormwater during a storm event that keeps it out of the system for a little while. So it'll collect water, and generally speaking, what it will do is, if you just leave a barrel open, it will gather 3 inches of rain during a storm. But if you have gutters running along the sides of your garage and you put the rain barrel in the back of your garage and you hook your downspout to your rain barrel, you'll get everything that hits the roof will go into your gutters and go into your rain barrel, and the whole thing will fill up in a single storm. So that's generally what we're doing. And that's a lot of water, right? So that's all water that is not then running down the driveway and going into the catch basin and into the system and potentially contributing to a backup. It can also reduce usage of water from the water supply system. So you're bringing water to all these properties as well through a different set of pipes. Well, if you're watering your garden, you can just use the water from your rain barrel rather than actually turning on your faucet and using water from the system. So I guess I've called it retaining it for elective use at a later date. Similar to that is gray water systems. So this is really less a matter of managing stormwater as it is a matter of managing other water that's going into the system. So if you're keeping some of the stormwater from entering the system and keeping some of the, let's say, water from your bathtub or your laundry room from going into the system at the same time, you're reducing the overall burden on the sewer system. So this only works for certain water that you're sending out. But generally what you have is these three-way valves that do some filtering, and they'll send the filtered water out, and then the less filtered water will go to the sewer. But it preserves some of the wastewater from a building and allows that to be used for, say, irrigating the landscaping. You can actually also recycle it and use it to flush toilets and things like that. And there are buildings that are being designed that way now. But it's just one more way we can contribute less overall wastewater into the sewer system and keep the overall levels of water in that sewer system down so that we don't get overflow events. Green roofs are another thing. These are actually sort of more similar to the bioswales. This is the Central Bus Depot in Chester, England. I was there this summer and it's really cool when you're standing around underneath it. This is a absolutely huge green roof. Water that hits a roof usually goes straight to the ground or the sewer. This green roof will hold water for use by the plants that are growing on the roof. And you can hold it in the soil for eventual slow release if there's too much water, for the plants. But, this building, it rains a lot in Chester, England, like a lot. And this building contributes a lot less water to the stormwater system than all those buildings around it, just because it holds so much on the roof. Now, obviously, there are structural considerations there. You can't just take the roof of, 1 East 14 Mile and expect to put a green roof on it because it will collapse. But if you build the structure properly and you have the correct reinforcement, you can put a green roof on it. There are lots of examples in this area. If you want to see a kind of cute demonstration version of it, in Innovation Hills, the park in Rochester Hills, it's at Hamlin and Adams Road, has a little pavilion that people can have parties in, and it's got a green roof. And then they actually have a display next to it that shows you all the layers of the green roof. It's pretty cool. It's a nice way to see it up close. The other thing that this does is that with all this pavement and all these shingled roofs, we get a huge heat island effect in our cities. All that is absorbing sunlight all day, and then it's radiating it back up. And the temperatures in cities are generally a lot higher than in the surrounding areas. In fact, when I go out to Bruce Township, which is one of my other clients, I will be coming back from their meeting and I will just watch the temperature go up a degree every couple miles I drive as I get back into Berkeley, because there's so much more pavement here than there is out there. It's usually 5 or 6 degrees cooler out there than it is here. So this can help with that as well. This is, I think I've mentioned this before, but this is kind of my favorite low-tech lazy man solution. Leaving a little bit of leaf litter on the ground over a given area decreases water reaching the ground during peak storm intensity. Depending on the type of leaves you've got, it can decrease the impact of water during peak storm intensity up to 50%, just having a couple inches of leaves on the ground. So that means that the water is not hitting the ground, building up before it has time to percolate and just immediately flowing. It's being absorbed by that leaf litter before it hits the ground. And it just diminishes the overall impact of the peak of the storm. It can also absorb or slow some of the flow. So if you've got, let's say your neighbor's property is a little higher than yours and a lot of water flows off of it, like for instance, my neighbor's house is higher than my lot. I always leave a pile of leaves back there. And ever since I started doing that, the flooding down the side of my house is a lot better. So I'm getting, it's really easy to just leave leaves where they are. Or rake a few of them over into a pile if you don't get them naturally. But it actually does help some. It's not going to be a panacea or anything, but a little bit here and there can actually have a pretty large cumulative effect. Also does provide habitat for certain creatures over the winter. And then finally, just in general, if we can find places for green space, landscaping, and plants, that's going to provide more potential infiltration points. So, we look at our community and we've got a lot of pavement. But as things redevelop over time, there's probably going to be some opportunities to get a little island here, a little bit of an island here that could maybe support a tree or some bushes or fountain grasses or whatever it happens to be. And that every little bit helps keep water out of the system, and the system is less prone to failure for every little bit of water that you keep out of it. So that's kind of the overall message is the less you're feeding into the system, the less prone to failure the system is going to be. And then I guess as a corollary to that, the slower you feed water into the system, the less prone to failure the system will be, because it's going to be able to handle that slower flow of water more easily than it would handle a catastrophic influx.
Do we have any like, I just recently noticed that the Shalom site is for sale. Do we have things like that for like newly platted?
Yeah.
No, we don't.
Yeah,
So-
there's gonna have to be retention on that. Whatever gets built there, it will need to retain its stormwater. And they can do that in a basin if they've got the room for it based on their design, or they could do it underground. They could implement some of these rain garden or swale ideas if they are so inclined.
How does that work is it only if it's sold like it's listed as 8 acres? I thought it was like 7, but if they break it up into like 6 different ones, each one,
it depends a little bit. If you sold it off as like individual lots, you might have more of a individual lot standard that you had to apply. But if they're designing it and building it as a plat or a site condominium or some other type of subdivision, then they're going to have to do on-site retention for the full.
and do we have
extent
a
of
green
it.
space for that? Like an ordinance for a certain amount of green space if it was sold as like site condos?
No, not really. Your green space would kind of be determined by your
Lot size?
lot size, your lot coverage, and your impervious coverage standards.
It seems like we should be doing something, as you just said, about that now, since we've got, these 3 sites that are huge and can have an absolutely huge, detrimental impact on our stormwater systems. Or we could really make an impact in a positive
Sure.
way. I don't know if it's too late, and I know we're not here to discuss that, but like, it seems like there's really an opportunity to kind of do that.
Yeah, I mean, if you get a retention system to modern standards on that site, even though it's going to be more covered with buildings, you're probably going to have less water flowing off that site during a storm event than you do now. A field will absorb a lot of water, but you might actually make out better with a storm retention system on that site and all the houses there.
Right,
Other than you
especially
do
if we're
now.
thinking of Baker as well, and
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on with Hunter.
Just
but
given the age of those buildings, I'm guessing there's not a lot of retention.
I think that they
engineered
did
to
something
the
with
sites.
retention.
They
by
may
the
have.
school at some point, but I'm sure it can be improved. So there's nothing we currently have in the ordinance or in order to kind of enhance because we have this strange opportunity in Clausen to have available land. We don't have anything like that right now.
I mean, we don't really have any, like, we can't force it to become a planned unit development or something where we're
Right,
putting.
no, I just didn't know since if it's sold as, like you said, a site condos, right?
Mhm.
Is there the opportunity to put into place some type of green space for the whole community or the overall?
Go ahead, Nick.
Oh.
Nick has something he wants to say.
So, as you said earlier, the sites are now open for bid right now for potential contractors. And in the bid that the school district and their consultants provided, they had a draft plot plan of both Shalom and Baker, and on Shalom, the obviously larger of the two sites. They did have shown a retention pond on the site that was probably about the size of 3 to 4, maybe 5 of the lots. So that way the future developers are aware that that's going to be a major issue. And in the conversations that we've had with interested parties so far, that's definitely one of the concerns we brought up to them. So they're more than aware of the flooding area issue in Clausen and then Southeast Oakland County as a whole. So while we may not have something in our ordinances, when they're meeting the county requirements, they're aware of what the situation's like. They're definitely going to be cautious on how to.
Well,
Yeah,
I don't know if
that's not
that
to say
correlates
that
to
you-
cautious.
They're trying to.
They're required to meet certain
That's the
things.
key.
Well,
Right.
yeah, we
And-
know that there's certain, Joe already said that there's already certain regulation. I'm saying there's an opportunity right now to help Clausen with the current, instead of just meeting a standard of what Oakland County, I'm saying. I don't know does that mean that they're required to have a pond there if they buy all 8 acres?
I don't know
or-
for certain. I know I spoke with our engineer in passing a few weeks ago about this, and he shared something about the site condos and how there's certain regulations in the state that if a certain amount of square footage is developed, there's a certain amount of water retention that has to be kept on site above ground and below ground. So I don't know for certain, but there are certainly regulations in place that we don't have to have in the city that developers are required to meet.
Okay,
And the only retention pond that I'm aware of is behind the Westgate Shopping Center. If you drive back in their parking lot, there is a retention pond there. It's
Behind
got
where?
Westgate,
There's
14 Mile and Crooks.
Couple sites up
Westgate.
at Brooks that have them too.
It's fenced off, there's plants growing in there, and it maintains water pretty much year round, I believe.
Oh, it's like behind the Tim Hortons and
Yeah,
whatnot,
Yeah.
on the north side.
behind the auto parts
Behind
store.
that,
the very
yeah.
front.
oh, that
Yes.
side, okay.
I was thinking the south side at
dollar
first,
store.
too. I was like-
There's a pond behind the dollar store?
That's just a bunch of concrete, which we're hoping to see green space there. So.
I think that was probably put in because of the water problem when they were building that center.
So, and I can't say with 100% certainty that there is, but it's definitely something that we've talked about that the consultants with the school district have made aware to people that are going to be hoping to develop the site, that they'll make it a
I
priority.
love that, but it really, at the end of the day, developers are developing and they're looking at bottom line. They're not
Are
looking at.
those plans binding by any
So in,
way?
no, I mean, it's
Yeah,
recommended,
so
but the
that-
plans that they bring forward, the great thing is this body is going to have the opportunity to vote yes or no, whether there's water detention or not. So, and again, the conversations that we've had as a city, it's a main sticking point throughout town. And so,
Yeah,
whatever plan comes in front of you guys, I'm sure you'll make that one of the top things that's reviewed.
And we appreciate you bringing it forward as much as possible,
Yeah.
early stages, whether they take into consideration or not, at least you guys are trying to put it out there.
Yeah.
can I just say one more thing? When we're reviewing things, though, we are bound to our ordinance and we can't overextend. Like, just because we don't want that there, we don't have an ordinance that allows us to have that mechanism. So without that ability to enforce, we're outside of our right as planning commission to enforce anything. And I don't mean this directed at you, Nick. I'm just saying in general, we can't say, no, you don't have water retention that we want, because they'd say, well, we comply with whatever ordinance or whatever engineer told them to comply with. I'm just saying for consideration, maybe we can have a discussion eventually about, and it probably shouldn't happen once we're looking at bids and they're having their plans in front of us, but is there opportunity for more? And again, it's not directed just at you, it's just a general comment.
I agree 100%. Well, that will be an issue. Somebody's gonna come in and say, it's by right, I have to do it just the way you have it on your ordinance right now. And we will say no by the chance, there comes a lawsuit,
Yeah.
and he'll do it again.
So I'll look into it a little bit more to see what the county regulations are with those developments, because I know there's been a number of school sites in Royal Oak, Ferndale, Oak Park that have had projects like Shalom that have been developed and what type of standards they had to meet. Because I believe a majority of communities in Oakland County follow their standards, and it's for a reason, because they're usually a little bit stronger than most. So I'll see what I can find and maybe provide something to you guys in the next couple of weeks to review in the meantime.
Cool,
Okay,
thanks.
thank you.
I did have a question though. Does the city maintain, or do we have any kind of opportunity to look at a map and where there's any city-owned spaces today? You drive through town, there's some green space because it's undeveloped land, but I just don't know what's privately owned versus city-owned, because I'd love to implement a lot of these things, some more simple like gardens than others, like detention and retention. But it's tough to say what's even available if we want to go after something in our master plan. To say, do we even have the opportunity to do that, or is it all, privately held and we have no control?
Yeah, I think most of the vacant properties you see is privately owned.
Yeah, I didn't know
don't think the city
anything
owns that
that-
much property.
The only thing would be our city parks
Yeah,
that we
like
could
even
do
Hunter
some of that.
could, and there's a lot of space back there. for
Right.
Something else, besides the field, but sure.
I have a question for Joe, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
So on the property that I manage, I'm installing those French drains in the basement
Sure.
because I have water coming in from the wall.
Yeah.
And the city there is making me hook it up to the sewers.
Mhm.
Do we do the same thing here?
Yeah, generally, I think we do. Oh, okay. People, I guess people don't pull permits for French drains here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But I don't think,
Foundation drains, it's required.
I'm sorry?
For foundation drains, it's required on the backfill. So that's something that does get inspected on the backfill inspection.
but we're also not allowed to just tap into the city sewer either, right?
Well, yeah, you can't do it on your
Yeah,
own.
like,
You gotta
you
have,
put
you gotta
my
pay a
like,
tap fee.
Put it there and tap in, right? Like. I don't
Yeah,
think we can do
You,
that.
you need a permit to do that,
Okay.
yeah.
So DPW will inspect that, or who does it?
It
DPW?
would be DPW, you know,
It's the building department
yeah.
for the foundation. Yeah, anything on private is inspected by the building department. Anything public is inspected by the DPW.
Yeah, so your connection point is gonna be inspected by DPW and the actual drain itself and the foundation is gonna be inspected by the building department.
Yeah, the house I'm living in is a 100-year-old house now. And it had its own septic field in the front yard when it was built.
Hmm,
And that's where the water went. And when the house was put up, it had rain gutters put on. The rain gutters are hooked onto the same sewer system that served the city. All the water from the house went down the sewer system.
sure.
And somewhere, I don't know if it was in the 50s or 60s, they outlawed it. You had to disconnect your rain gutters from their pipes,
And their pipes.
which never made sense to me because now the rainwater comes down the pipe. I direct it onto my driveway. My driveway directs it out to the street.
And it goes into the catch
I don't
basin.
Evaporation, you're not losing anything there, so I understand that point.
It's because of debris. So every time all the leaves and stuff that enter in that system, they go into the storm system, which is a combination which enters into the sanitary system. That's the reason why that was stopped. So, yeah, everything right now does, even on new site plans, the city does require a storm system in the backyard that goes into the combination system, but it's configured with a trap system, which has the ability to filter out or not introduce debris into that system. Yeah.
Sure.
So Joe, going back to, the master plan update and things like that, and I know we talked about this in the sustainability committee a bit too, is like, grassroots, what can residents do? So there's some good information, I think, between rain barrels and, gardens and things like that. So how, are you gonna help parse it out? Do you want me to send you like potential slides? Cause I would love to make sure we're going to focus this body mainly on what we can, control at a city level or by ordinance and things like that. But
Sure.
I think it's just important to get information out to the public because there's some misinformation that, somebody grabs a mat and throws it over, the storm cover or the drains in front of their house and things like that. And like, is that good or bad? But also other ways you can manage waste, storm runoff water. So
Sure.
do you have an approach for how we could compile information you've been presenting that could be beneficial in
Sure.
small truncated portions? Like this is kind of overwhelming for
Right.
somebody who can probably
But you could
boil it down to a
focus on
couple of
the-
key points.
You could focus on the more bite size, elements of it for some sort of outreach material. Yeah,
For sure.
yeah,
And even for open houses, like just a flyer, some of this information, right?
sure.
Trying to think of like the best way, like, do you want to manage, or do you want me to help pull out things I think are relevant on your suggestions?
So I mean, if you've got some ideas, I'd love to hear them, but yeah, we can absolutely be thinking about that.
I just don't want to like this to just disappear into,
Sure.
some, storage where you keep all these great, shit, but then we don't get it out to the public for
Right.
consumption as well.
Hey, Joe, have you ever heard of cities, and this is just something, again, I saw on like Facebook or something, so it doesn't mean it's true, but certain cities not allowing rain barrels, and any insight as to why that might be so? Are there any, is it like a mosquito thing that they have to be covered or something, or?
Well, they should be covered. They should definitely be covered because, yeah, they can become an open water container can be potentially a breeding ground for mosquitoes. I'm not aware of any cities that are necessarily banning them. I know there are some homeowners associations that ban them.
Oh, for aesthetic reasons.
Oh, yeah,
It's not
exactly. Right.
something-
I
Okay.
mean, I don't know why they care if someone's got it in their backyard, but
Right. Well, and I was wondering, to your point, Josh, like, I want to ask that question first, like, maybe we could. Even if we're an open house, have a rain barrel and kind of like show how it works, or like how you might do it yourself kind of thing. I always drive by the rain barrels on 14 Mile there and always think, I should just do this one day, right? But it might be kind of a fun interactive way to kind of engage people. I don't know if that's just doing too much, adding too much, but I think there's a general curiosity to being able to do those. And
Yeah,
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe it's something we could take with sustainability committee.
yeah,
Yeah.
possibly. Yeah.
We have some more information from those
Yeah.
packets. of things as well.
US GBC, the US United States Green Building Council does annual rain barrel events. So it's possible that you could even get one in Clawson,
wait, they could like come here and do an event, you mean?
potentially, yeah.
What's it called again?
United States Green Building Council. And they do kind of it's like a workshop on
Yeah.
making your own rain barrel, and then they have the barrels, so you can actually take a barrel and some of the hose and stuff with you.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Huh?
We'll go.
Yeah, right. Be like the little Home Depot Saturday, put it together, shop.
Yeah. Any
Joe.
other? Sure.
I know, well, Nick mentioned he was gonna look at the Oakland County rules and what that provides and what, I guess, what we're able to enforce or what they're able to enforce.
Mhm.
But I'd be interested to know, based off of your informational presentation that you just gave, what options, what of those alternatives can we really capitalize on to help supplement what Oakland County enforces?
Sure.
So, we'll soon find out what Oakland County wants or requires, but what can we even conceptually from a master plan or ordinance perspective, where can we add on
Right.
potentially?
I think that there are ways that we can build. I think the swales and rain gardens are some of the lower hanging fruit. Green roofs require a lot of structural know-how but the rain gardens and the swales are fairly simple, and a bioswale, it doesn't necessarily have to take up a lot of space. You can do a bioswale in a fairly small area. In fact, if you go down South Main in Royal Oak, there are a whole bunch of bioretention areas along the side of South Main down there. There's a break in the curb so the water can flow through. They've probably got 8 or 9 of them down there. So I think those are two things that I would definitely point to as things that we could be doing, both in our own right of way in the future. And of course, we would have to develop a plan and do some costing of that in terms of implementation, but it's something that we could certainly recommend in a plan. And then on private sites, I think you have really 2 choices. In your regulations, you can either require or incentivize those things. So requiring it's just a hard requirement and you have to do it. Incentives are more like, okay, we'll give you a 10% parking reduction if you put in, bioretention areas on X percent of your site or something like that, just off the top of my head. So, we can talk about that in terms of framework for how we might think about this, moving forward when we're actually implementing our master plan and putting together ordinances for it. But I think those are two things that we should definitely be looking at and how we might implement those in our ordinances. And then as a city in whatever project we happen to be engaged in, what can we do proactively to set the tone as a municipality?
Right, because I know, later down the line in the master plan discussion, we, a couple of our modules or chapters we want to
Sure.
talk about is some of the corridors.
Right.
And, we've talked about space, and if we have the right of way, like you said, then it's an opportunity to start implementing what we just saw.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. And it's something that we need to be thinking about in all those corridors.
Please,
That's all.
good. And is there anything for other business?
I don't have anything else.
Nobody has any other business? How about a planner's report?
My previous comments. Dan.
Previous comments. Okay, we're moving right along here. Staff report and training opportunities.
I have nothing additional unless anyone has any questions.
It's been put on our agendas to see. Nothing there, legal update, no attorney, no legal update. Unless anybody else has any comments about anything, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, sir.
Support.
Motion and support, roll call please.
I'm sorry, who was the support on that one? I could not.
Somebody have our support.
Okay, I just want to be sure. All right, double support. Mr. Kucera. Mr. Nushai,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer, Mr. Colbert.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.